Welcome back to Room for Horror. They say that love is the strongest force in the universe. We are told that it can move mountains, that it can conquer fear, and that it can heal the deepest wounds. But there is a darker side to love, a side that refuses to let go, even when the laws of nature demand it, a side that defies the cold finality of the grave. Tonight, we take you to the outskirts of Bangkok, to the Thonburi side of the river. It is a place of old canals, wooden houses on stilts, and shadows that stretch long across the murky water. This is a story about a promise. It is a story about the terrifying lengths a person will go to just to ensure their loved one is safe. And it serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the things that go bump in the night aren't monsters trying to hurt us. They are the broken remnants of those who loved us the most. Dim the lights, put on your headphones, and listen closely. In the maze of canals that web through the older districts of Bangkok, time seems to move slower. The modern city, with its gleaming sky trains and glass towers, feels like a distant dream here. In this neighborhood, the houses are built of teak wood that has blackened with age, standing on tall concrete stilts to rise above the black, sluggish water of the canal. In one of these aging houses lived a young man named Art and his grandmother, Bua. Art called her Yai, which means grandma or elderly woman, showing his deep affection. Art was 22, a young man with a gentle face and hands roughened by hard labor. He had abandoned his university studies 2 years prior, a sacrifice made without hesitation when Yai Bua's health began to fail. Her eyes, once sharp and bright, were now clouded with cataracts, leaving her world a blur of gray shadows. Her legs, weak from arthritis, could barely carry her from the bed to the porch. Art was her eyes, her legs, and her world. Their house was located at the very end of a narrow concrete walkway that hovered above the canal. It was a lonely spot. To get there, one had to walk past the abandoned boat shed and the spirit shrine that had fallen into disrepair. The neighbors were few, and the silence at night was heavy, broken only by the splashing of monitor lizards in the water below and the hum of mosquitoes. Despite the isolation, the house was filled with warmth. Every evening before Art left for his night shift, a routine took place. It was a ritual of care that defined their lives. Art worked as a rider for a delivery app, zigzagging through the chaotic city traffic on his motorbike from dusk until dawn. It was dangerous work, especially during the monsoon season, but it paid enough to buy Yai Bua's medicine and keep rice in the cooker. "Yai," Art would say, kneeling beside her low wooden bed. "I've filled the water bucket. The food is on the table, covered with the net. Don't get up unless you have to." Yai Bua would reach out, her trembling, paper-thin hand finding his face. "Drive slowly, Art. The roads are slippery. Don't worry about the money. Just come home." "I always come home, Yai, I promise. I'll be back before the roosters crow to fix the leak in the roof." The roof had been a source of anxiety for weeks. A section of the corrugated tin above Yai Bua's bed had rusted through. Every time it rained, icy water would drip down, soaking the floorboards. Art had bought a sheet of metal and a tube of sealant, promising to fix it on his next day off. But the shifts were long, and exhaustion was a heavy weight. "Go," she would whisper. "The spirits will watch over you." But on this particular Tuesday in October, the spirits seemed to have looked away. The weather turned violent just after midnight. It wasn't a normal rain, it was a tropical deluge, a curtain of water so dense it blurred the streetlights into hazy smears of orange. The wind howled through the canals, ripping through the trees and tearing at the loose tin sheets of the shanties. Inside the wooden house, Yaibua lay awake. The sound was deafening. The rain hammered against the roof like handfuls of gravel. The wind whistled through the gaps in the wooden walls, extinguishing the small oil lamp she kept burning for comfort. She was plunged into total darkness. She heard it. The leak. The water wasn't just dripping. It was beginning to pour through the rusted hole above her. She pulled her thin blanket tighter, curling her legs up to avoid the growing puddle on the floor. She shivered. The temperature had dropped sharply, the humid heat replaced by a bone-chilling dampness. "Art," she whispered into the dark, her voice trembling. "Be safe." Her heart hammered in her chest. She knew Art was out there in this. She imagined him on his motorbike, fighting the wind, the blinding rain, the slick asphalt. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the house. The wind had torn open one of the wooden window shutters in the main room. It banged violently against the wall, like a fist demanding entry. The rain sprayed inside, soaking the living area. Yaibua tried to sit up, panic rising in her throat. She couldn't see to fix it. If she tried to walk on the wet floorboards, she would slip. She would break a hip, or worse, fall through the gaps into the black water below. She was trapped, alone, helpless in the dark. She began to pray, chanting broken verses of protection, rocking back and forth as the storm raged and the shutter banged its violent rhythm. Hours seemed to pass. The water on the floor was rising, touching the edge of her mattress. She was cold, so cold that her teeth chattered. She was listening, waiting for the first faint, distant rumbling of the delivery trucks heading toward the fresh market. The sound that always signaled the shift from deep night to pre-dawn, an hour she knew to be close to 3. Then she heard a new sound. It came from outside, cutting through the roar of the wind. The distinct, metallic clatter of the front gate chain being undone. Yaibua froze. Usually, Art would call out. He would yell, "Yai, I'm home!" over the noise of the engine. But there was no engine sound tonight. No motorbike purr, just the storm. And now, footsteps. They were heavy, wet footsteps moving along the wooden walkway outside. They didn't sound like Art's usual light, energetic stride. These were slow, deliberate, heavy, as if the person walking was carrying a weight that was too much to bear. The front door creaked open. A gust of wind and rain swept into the house, smelling of river mud and ozone. "Art!" Yaibua called out, her voice barely a croak. Silence. Then the door was pushed shut with a firm click. The lock was turned. The footsteps entered the room. Yaibua sat up, squinting into the blackness. "Art? Is that you, grandson? Why aren't you speaking?" There was no verbal answer, only a low, wet, rasping sound. It sounded like air struggling to move through a crushed windpipe. Fear, cold and sharp, pricked at Yaibua's skin. But then, the presence moved past her bed. She felt a wave of icy air, colder than the storm outside, radiating from the figure. The figure moved to the banging window. The banging stopped. The shutter was pulled shut and latched with a strength that shook the floorboards. The wind was silenced. Then, the footsteps moved to the corner of the room where Art kept his tools. She heard the familiar rustle of the tool bag, the squeak of the sealant tube. The figure dragged itself to the center of the room, directly under the leak. Yaibua listened, paralyzed, as she heard the sound of a chair being dragged across the floor. Then, the heavy, wet weight stepping up onto it. The sound of metal being pressed against metal. The smell of silicone sealant filled the air, mixing with that overwhelming scent of muddy river water and something else. Something metallic and coppery, like fresh blood. The dripping stopped. The roof was fixed. The figure stepped down from the chair. It moved toward her bed. Yaibua pressed herself against the wall, her heart beating so hard it hurt her ribs. "Art?" she whispered, tears streaming from her clouded eyes. "You're hurting, aren't you? You're hurt." She felt the mattress depress, as if someone had sat down heavily beside her. A hand reached out and touched her cheek. The hand was freezing. It was wet, sodden, and slick. It felt like a piece of meat taken straight from the freezer, but the touch was gentle. It stroked her hair, tucking a loose strand behind her ear, just as Art did every night before he went to sleep. She heard that wet, rasping breath right beside her ear. It wasn't a groan. It was a hum. A broken, gurgling attempt at a hum. He was humming the lullaby she used to sing to him when he was a baby. "Sleep, Yai." The thought seemed to form in her head, though no words were spoken. "I'm home. The roof is fixed. You are safe." Overcome with a strange mixture of terror and comfort, Yaibua grabbed the freezing hand. She held it tight, trying to warm it with her own frail heat. "Good boy," she wept. "My good boy." She held the hand until exhaustion took her, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, the storm raging outside but unable to touch her. Morning arrived with a cruel, gray silence. The storm had passed, leaving the world dripping and battered. Yaibua woke up. The space beside her on the bed was empty. The mattress was cold. "Art!" she called out. She reached for her cane and slowly, painfully, got out of bed. The floor was damp, but the puddle was gone. She looked up, squinting with her poor vision. A piece of metal had been patched over the hole in the roof, messy but effective. The leak was gone. She moved to the kitchen. On the table, sitting in the center, was a plastic bag containing warm soy milk and patonko, fried dough sticks, her favorite breakfast. She smiled weakly. He must have gone out early to buy it, she thought. Or perhaps he was sleeping in the back room. Then, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't Art. It was a sharp, authoritative knock. Yaibua shuffled to the door and opened it. Standing there were 2 police officers and Mrs. Penn, the neighbor from 3 houses down. Mrs. Penn was crying, her hands covering her mouth. "Grandmother," the police officer said, his voice gentle but heavy with bad news. "May we come in?" They sat her down and held her hands. "There was an accident last night," the officer explained, "around 1 a.m. during the height of the storm." Yaibua shook her head. "No, Art came home. He fixed the roof. He brought me breakfast." The officer exchanged a look with his partner. He took a deep breath. "Grandmother, Art was on the Pra Pak Clow Bridge. The wind was too strong. His bike, it was hit by a truck that lost control. He was thrown over the railing." The officer paused, his voice faltering. "He fell into the river, Grandmother. The current was strong. We found his body this morning, washed up near the pier, miles from here. He died on impact. At 1 a.m., Yaibua sat frozen. 1 a.m.? Yes. But The roof. Her hand trembled as she pointed to the ceiling. He fixed the roof at 3 a.m. I heard him. He held my hand. The officers looked up. They saw the patch. Fresh silicone, still smelling sharp. They saw the wet, muddy footprints on the floorboards. Footprints that didn't dry. Dark stains that looked like a mixture of river sludge and oil. They looked at the table. The bag of soy milk. The officer walked over and touched the bag. "It's cold," he said softly. "Ice cold. But this shop? The one on the bag? It's on the other side of the river, near the bridge where he fell." Mrs. Penn, the neighbor, let out a sob. "I saw him," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Last night. I looked out my window during the storm. I saw someone walking down the walkway toward your house. He was dragging his leg. He looked all wrong, twisted. I thought it was a drunk. But he walked right through the locked gate, Yaibua. He walked through it." Yaibua looked at her hand, the hand that had held Art's freezing fingers all night. There was a smear of gray river mud on her palm. She didn't scream. She didn't cry out in horror. Instead, a profound, heartbreaking silence filled the room. She realized then what had happened. Art had died in the cold, dark water. His body was broken. His life was gone. But his worry for her, his promise to fix the roof, his need to ensure she was dry and fed, was so powerful that it had pulled his spirit out of the river. He had dragged his broken spiritual form miles through the storm. He had come home one last time to finish his chores, to keep his promise. He couldn't speak because the dead have no voice. He was cold because the river had taken his warmth, but he was there. The officers left, unsure of what to write in their report regarding the fixed roof. Yaibua sat alone in the quiet house. She picked up the cold soy milk. She placed her hand on the muddy footprint near the bed. "Thank you, Art," she whispered into the empty air. "Thank you for coming home. You can rest now. The roof is fixed. I am safe." Outside, the canal water flowed slowly, dark and silent, carrying its secrets out to the sea. But in the house at the end of the lane, the roof remained dry, held together by a seal stronger than silicone, stronger than steel, and stronger even than death itself. In Thailand, there is a belief that the spirit remains confused for the first few days after death, often returning to the places and people they were most attached to in life. This is usually a source of fear. We light incense to guide them away. We hang talismans to keep them out. But perhaps we shouldn't always be afraid. Sometimes the dragging sound in the hallway isn't a monster coming to take you. Sometimes it's just someone you loved, trying to make sure you locked the front door. If you've ever felt a sudden drop in temperature, or smelled a familiar scent when no one else was there, maybe don't run away. Maybe just whisper a thank you. If this story touched you, or if you felt a chill run down your spine, please give this video a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. It helps the channel grow and allows us to bring more of these dark tales to light. Until next time, sleep well and keep the door locked.